Over the last few weeks, I've talked to several Christians who say they're sitting out of November's presidential election. They don't like either of the two candidates, so they're just not going to vote. And this last Tuesday night's debate didn't help anything. In my opinion, that whole debate was an embarrassment on several levels. And to this point, by the way, most every American knows who they're voting for anyways. I don't think there's any undecided voters left in the United States. The real issue is people deciding whether or not they're going to vote at all. And that's really the point of this video. If you're a Christian person who's contemplating sitting out of this election, I encourage you to stay with me to the end of this video and allow me the privilege of suggesting several things that I think will help guide you in your decision to vote or not. But before I go into that, I must offer this disclaimer. As Christians, it's important that we maintain objectivity when it comes to politicians. By that, I mean beware of any Christian leader who seems to have an undying allegiance to a certain politician or a certain political party. It seems that we've become so polarized as a nation that we've lost our ability to call balls and strikes on politicians. We're so polarized that if we praise one candidate for one thing, it makes other people think we're completely for everything that candidate does or says, and therefore by default completely against the opposing candidate. Christian person, beware of becoming an apologist for any political candidate. That's not what God has called us to be. But also beware of shutting down intellectually when someone praises the candidate that you don't like or criticizes the one that you do. The idea of Trump derangement syndrome might be a real thing. Those infected find zero positive qualities in the former president. And as soon as you bring his name up, they shut down mentally. And many people have a similar reaction when discussing Vice President Kamala Harris. So please don't let that be true of you. You're better than that. You're smarter than that. Okay, so that concludes my disclaimer. Now on to the topic at hand. In spite of the clown show that presidential politics in America has become, Christians must stay involved in the political process because if not, all the hordes of hell will fill that vacancy. By staying involved specifically, I mean that some Christians should run for political office, but all Christians should get out and vote. Some people have explained that the reason that they're not going to vote is because they believe the election is rigged. So they say, my vote doesn't count anyways. Or another common objection to voting is that both candidates are so undesirable. So you say, I don't want to cast a favorable vote for either of them. Or something I often hear is, I'm not voting in the presidential election because my citizenship is in heaven. So let's discuss these concerns in the order that I just mentioned them. First, election integrity is a huge issue. Maybe it is rigged, but the fact is we don't know. And until it's proven, we must conduct ourselves as if we have a free and fair election. Remember, your vote represents a privilege that citizens of many other countries do not have. It's a privilege that God has given you because he's allowed you to be born in the United States. And with this God-given privilege comes a stewardship. To not vote at all is to disregard the privilege that God gave you. I'm telling you from that standpoint, God wants you to vote. Now stay with me. These thoughts build on each other. Secondly, what about that moral objection? You say, I don't want to cast an approving vote for either of them. My conscience just won't let me. I totally get that. But a conscience can be informed. So here's some information. You're probably an idealist, and sometimes so am I. Ideally, we would like to have two presidential candidates with good moral standards and a charming disposition and intellectual prowess. However, we definitely don't have that in either of these two candidates. But at this point in the electoral process, we can no longer be idealists. We've got to be realists. Realistically, we have to admit that neither political party reflects Christian values. Also, realistically, we have to admit that one of these two candidates is going to be our next president. So for Christians to not vote at all is to just turn over this country to those who obviously have disdain for the Christian faith. In the lesser of two evils discussion, both are evil, and so are you, by the way, but one is less evil. Remember that every election over the country's last 248 years has been a contest between the lesser of two evils. If you're abstaining from voting in this election for moral reasons, you'll have to abstain from every election going forward. Every election is choosing between the lesser of two evils. For me, I'm going to vote, and I'm going to vote for less evil. Specifically, when choosing between the two evils of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, remember that President Trump has been much more favorable to Christians. During his previous term, President Trump dispatched lawyers to Grace Community Church in Los Angeles. And he did that to help advocate for the fact that church is essential, while Los Angeles County was oppressively attempting to keep churches closed during COVID. President Trump, who I don't believe is a saved man to this point, he was on the right side of that issue. And on the issue of abortion, President Trump does seem to waffle a lot, and I find that extremely disheartening. However, he is the one who appointed 3 pro-life Supreme Court justices. While I don't think he has a biblical understanding of why he should be pro-life, he is way more likely to surround himself with people that do have a biblical understanding about the life issue than Kamala Harris would be. So when you cast your vote, you're not saying, I approve of everything this candidate has done or will do, but you are saying, realistically, it's either going to be this candidate or that candidate, and this candidate is less evil than that candidate. Remember that a vote for one person is a vote against another person. As much as I don't necessarily like it, this is a two-party system. Therefore, the election is binary. And from what I can tell, both parties are godless, but the Democrat Party promotes an overtly godless agenda, as seen through their enthusiastic support of the LGBTQ agenda and full-term abortion. I'm voting against that, and you should too. You should go vote for less evil. Christian person, I promise you that you do not want to see Kamala Harris as your president. Biblically informed Christians understand that good government will not save us, but bad government could destroy us. Thirdly, dear Christian, maybe the reason you're planning to not vote in this year's election is because your citizenship is in heaven, and that's true. Philippians 3:20 is a wonderful verse. However, I want to remind you that you have a dual citizenship. Therefore, you have a dual responsibility. For now, you do live in a temporal world, and therefore you have a civic responsibility to vote in our constitutional republic. To say I'm only a citizen of heaven is a cop-out, and it's not the whole story. You're both a citizen of heaven and a citizen of the United States. So American Christians, you have a dual citizenship and therefore an earthly responsibility. By way of conclusion, I have committed my life to communicating one primary message, and that's the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ. There may come a day in the United States when Christians will be fined, persecuted, imprisoned, or even martyred for preaching that message. And to be clear, I do believe the gospel message is a message worth dying for. However, there's no reason to more rapidly usher in the persecution of Christians. A vote for President Trump is not ideal, but from what I can tell, voting for him is a vote against our country more rapidly restricting Christian voices. Christian person, go vote because it's a God-given privilege and therefore stewardship. Go vote for less evil. Go vote for the sake of the responsibility that coincides with dual citizenship. Go vote for God's glory and for the sake of generations to come. And all along the way, would you pray for revival? Because righteousness exalts a nation, and blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord.